If you have ever struggled with classroom management, I have got 6 techniques that I'm going to share with you today to make sure your classroom runs smoothly. So before we talk about the tips on classroom management, I want to actually get a definition so that we're all talking about the same thing. So classroom management are the skills and techniques that teachers use to keep students organized, orderly, focused, attentive, on task, and academically productive. So I think as teachers, we are all in this constant battle with ourselves to try to be more organized, try to be more orderly, more focused. And that's what today's whole episode is about. So let's talk about the reasons why you want great classroom management strategies. First off, it's going to help reduce student anxiety. Everybody does better if they know what to expect when they walk into your classroom, if they know how you deliver lessons, if they know how you pass back papers, if they know when you put grades in the grade book, if they know what the expectations of them are. Everybody does better. That's not just students, that's everybody in general. So it's going to help reduce student anxiety. It's also going to help reduce teacher stress. If you are stressed out, take a quick look at your classroom management procedures and see if there's things that you can do to help reduce your own stress, because a well-run classroom naturally has a lot less chaos, and a lot less chaos reduces teacher stress. It's also going to increase academic growth. Again, going back to if students know what is expected of them, they are going to naturally do better. And this is going to be magnified if you have that great classroom flow where everybody knows what's expected of them. We're not putting up with misbehavior, and we can use the small amount of time we actually have with students delivering material to increase their academic growth. I'm John Van Dusen. I am a teacher, a coach, and I'm also a soldier in the U.S. Army Reserve, where I serve as an instructor for the Command and General Staff College. I want to thank you for stopping by your classroom coffee break. So let's get right into the strategies. The first one is establish clear classroom expectations. Now, this goes all the way from when the students first walk into your room. Do you have something on the board that they're supposed to do right away? Are they supposed to clear their desks right away? Are they allowed to sit and mingle and talk with their friends? Maybe they are, and that's a good strategy too. Let them get a little bit of that chattiness out of them before you expect them to learn. So there's a ton of ways to establish clear classroom expectations, and I'd love to hear how you establish yours in the classroom. Do you have them posted? Do you go through them every day? Is it something you talk about for the first week? Is it something that you come back to several times throughout the year? But whatever they are, make sure that you establish them, and they have to be clear. They can't be any gray area with what students are supposed to do, or they will definitely operate within that gray area. Strategy number 2 goes along the same lines, and that's having clear routines and procedures. And this goes, again, right from when they first walk into the room until they exit the room. Routines revolve around how you take attendance, how you pass out materials, how you cover brand new material. Something that the students taught me, something they did in 6th grade, is every time we say the word critical content, they do to make sure everybody is on the same page. If that's a procedure that you have in your room, that's great. I know when I taught elementary, I would say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, once you're quiet, we'll have some fun. And students would sing that second part along with me. And it got a little loud at first, but then everybody quieted right down. Now that I teach middle school, a real simple procedure I do is when I need the class to be quiet, I simply raise my hand and say signal. And everybody raises their hand and they just stop their conversation. Now, it doesn't work perfectly, but it's a procedure we have in place so that we can get everybody back on track. And I know there's teachers out there with fantastic routines and procedures on how they do different things. Again, I'd love to hear about them. Put them in the comments or tag me on X. Anyway, I'd love hearing new and fun ways to manage classrooms. Strategy number 3 involves building those positive relationships with your students. Now, this can be done as a class, but it works much better if it's down at the individual level. And I'm going to post a video I did a few years ago in the show notes about how to deal with difficult students. But those positive relationships can be built in the hallway, in the lunchroom. A great way is if you have students involved in other activities outside of school, such as sports or music or theater. Try to make it to one of those events just to see those students outside of school. One of my favorite interactions happened when I was a STEM teacher and I was at the gas station and I was standing in line with my pop and my candy bar, and one of my students walked in, saw me and said, "Mr. Van Dusen, oh my gosh, what are you doing here?" And granted, that was an elementary student, but then they proceeded to tell their mom how I was their STEM teacher, and they were just so impressed that I was actually out in public, out in the wild. I'm sure you've had similar experiences, but any way you can build those positive relationships. Maybe it's noticing something that a student is wearing on their sweatshirt and talking with them about it. Or maybe it's noticing if they get a new pair of shoes, or noticing something they're doodling in their notepad. Anything you can do to get on their level and build that positive relationship is going to help you when you have to move into that classroom management mode as a teacher. Strategy number 4, proximity and nonverbal signals. This is one of my favorite things to use, and I think it's something that goes very underutilized. I'm going to post in the show notes a video I did on classroom setup and how you can actually set up your desks or tables in such a way to help you manage your classroom better and take advantage of the ability to be close to those students. If you have a table that's a little chatty, sometimes just going and standing next to that table while delivering the material is enough to put them back on track. I'm also going to post in the show notes blog post I did about keeping students' attention, and a simple nonverbal signal that I use is a snap. I will notice students are falling away focus-wise. And in this blog post, I go into why I think that is. But sometimes a simple snap of my fingers is enough to bring their attention back to the board, the presentation, the book, whatever it is that we're supposed to be focusing on. But if you are able, please practice proximity and just move around the room, being closer to some students, further away from other students, and just see how it helps your classroom management. So when we think about classroom management, we often think about dealing with misbehavior. And I'll make the argument that if you go back and you have established expectations, you have established routines and procedures, you build those positive relationships, and you use proximity, you're going to have a lot less misbehavior to address. However, when it does happen, it's important that you address it quickly and calmly. And the reason I put a picture of a brain on this is, if you're watching the video, is as the adult in the room, we have a fully developed frontal lobe of our brain. So we are actually able to use that to stay calm and use logic. Remember that your students do not. Also remember that your students feel awkward and nobody likes to be embarrassed. So one of my favorite techniques with addressing misbehavior is I simply tell a student, "Get out." And I have them stand in the hallway. It gives them a few seconds to think about what happened. It gives me a few seconds to get the class moving to the next step without interrupting everything. And I go out in the hallway and have a conversation with that student. It does a few things. One, it gives us both time to formulate what just happened and what needs to be done. 2, it allows us to remove ourselves from the situation. So if there is some kind of argument, it's not happening in front of the students. And 3, it prevents that student from being embarrassed in front of their friends with whatever it was that they did. It also allows us a little bit of time, just even a few seconds, to take that anger that comes from the caveman part of our brain and move it back up to the frontal lobe so that we can calmly deal with the misbehavior. And the last thing I'll say about addressing misbehavior is when you need to do it, it's important that you have those clear expectations and you have those procedures and those routines established. So it's not you versus the student, it's the behavior versus the expectation. That can really de-escalate a situation quickly, calmly, and get you back to class and get you back on that road to academic growth. So going along with the strategy of removing the student from the situation, that leads right into strategy 6 of teaching self-regulation. Here at Kingsford, we use a program called Trails for social emotional learning, and it's all about how to take a situation, understand our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior related to that situation, and then get us back to a place where we can actually function as a productive student in the classroom. This is something that we do with all students. Some students kind of blow it off. They don't really appreciate it at all. And other students really take it to heart because it's something they need, not just in the classroom, but sometimes at home. So again, it's something we do with all students during our primetime hour, which you might call a homeroom, but it really focuses on allowing the student to self-reflect and figure out how they can get their emotions under control. Again, going from that frontal part of the lobe, which isn't fully developed in those students, instead of the caveman brain, which some students are in all the time, just based on their life situation, which is really sad. So now that you've put all these strategies in place, it's really important to reflect on what is actually working and what is not. I made this episode because I love learning new techniques on how to better manage my classroom, and I like to reflect on things that have worked in the past and things that have not. So a great way to do that is listening to podcasts like this one, watching videos. Keep a journal of things you have tried and things that you have not. It's so easy nowadays. It can either be a paper journal, it can be a Word doc, it can be something on your iPad. It's super simple just to keep track of things you have tried and if they've worked or not. And the thing is, with different classrooms, different things are going to work better than others. And that's one of the beauties of teaching is every year, every class is something just a little bit different that provides new challenges and new opportunities. Now, there are some pitfalls that come into having these clear expectations, these routines and procedures. And the biggest one I can think of is being inconsistent. A little bit of inconsistency is okay, but if you are consistently inconsistent in how you enforce your expectations, how you do those procedures, how you do those routines, then your classroom management is going to fall apart because it goes back to that first part and students aren't going to know what to expect. So consistency is going to get you out of that number one pitfall. Another pitfall is overreacting to minor misbehaviors. And that goes back to the idea of we are the adult in the room. We have that frontal lobe. We can use logic. We need to do it. And I think this probably most often happens towards the end of the day. Teachers get overstimulated just before a break. Students are really excited about leaving and having a vacation. But that's where you, as the teacher, as the adult in the room, need to practice some of those self-regulation techniques so that you're not overreacting to minor misbehaviors. Again, if you have those clear expectations, you have those procedures, it then becomes a question of the behavior against the expectation instead of you against the student. And I'd like to encourage you that you do not need to implement all of these at once. You can simply try one or two and see how that works. And again, reflect and see if it's working or not. And if it's working, great. And if it's not a failure. You just found a way that doesn't work. Like Thomas Edison said when inventing the light bulb, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways not to invent a light bulb. Classroom management's the same way. You will find those techniques that work for you in your class, and it might be different from year to year. But I would love to hear more if you implement one of these strategies and it works, or if it doesn't work, or if you have a go-to strategy not listed, please put it in the comments or watch one of my other videos, comment, or find me on X. I just ask that you find a way to keep this conversation going. Thanks for stopping by for your classroom coffee break.